What's going on, Dragons? Happy Friday. As always, I'm your co-host, Corey, and welcome to episode 29 of the ERCast, your weekly Friday Night Magic pre-show. Joining me this week in the Dragon's Den is my brother in cardboard, a very special, illustrious co-host, Cole.
Well, thank you very much, Corey. I'm happy to be here, and we have a super fun topic this week, so I'm excited to discuss it with you.
I'm excited too. This is a topic that I believe is going to be right up my alley. Not to toot my own horn a little bit, but first, Cole, how has this week in Magic been treating you?
Well, this week in Magic has been treating me pretty unfortunately because I didn't get the chance to play too much of it. I have been tinkering away a lot, behind the scenes. I'm doing a lot of swapping cardboard. I'm sleeving up cards. I'm breaking out. I'm busting open plastic. I'm gnawing away at the blister packs, but I have not had the chance to sling any spells, and so I'm feeling a little bit I need my fix.
The dopamine is running out.
That's right. How about you, Corey? What about your week?
I did not do too much magicking myself either. I went to Walmart trying to get some Thunder Junction action this weekend. On release weekend, already wiped out, just picked clean this place was. We ended up getting maybe 4, I think it was. We got 4 play boosters, 2 for myself, 2 for Sharon. I was hoping to possibly see a starter deck, but there were none to be seen. There was literally 2 starter decks that were on clearance from Midnight Hunt, I want to say. Old stuff.
Like Wilhel, that sort of thing. I think I saw a Reddit post about that. Honestly, pretty good prices. If you're listening to this now, it's probably too late, but you should go pick up some of those decks.
Yeah, if it was Wilhelt, I would have picked it up because I enjoy Wilhelt quite a bit, and I also think it's a decently strength commander deck for precon. No, this is the Lenore and Kyler deck.
Don't say Kyler around these parts. I've gotten whooped too many times. I got respect on the name.
Yeah. You should. I like the Magic naming convention of let's take a normal human real world name and just change one letter.
Well, it's like everybody needs a commander that their name rhymes with, but is not exactly the same. Let's think. Is there any? The only thing coming to mind is Nelly Borka, but that doesn't even rhyme with Corey. So,
I was sitting there trying to think. What rhymes with Cole then?
Well, I have a Cole the Forge Master or whatever. It's like Koll, which hey man, that counts.
I thought you were gonna say Colfanor, Sapperling of Colfanor.
That's a way cooler answer. Can you edit that in like I said it?
Hey, we'll splice it in right now. Actually, when you're listening to this conversation, this is the director's cut, if you didn't know. So you must be a premium member to hear it.
Okay.
And if you buy that logic, by the way, then you're going to really love our main topic of today. And we are talking politics because it's 2024.
We're not
the kind you're thinking of.
We got to specify. This is not going to be too political. We're only talking about bluffs, buffs, goofs, spoofs, laughs, and gaffs at the table, not in the election ring.
So no voting decks? Is that what you're trying to tell me right now? No voting decks.
Be careful what you wish for, Corey.
Yeah, I was planning on coming to this conversation talking about nothing but Tivit voting decks, and then Hamza, so I could have elephants. And I don't know of a donkey commander off the top of my head, so we'll just move on from this analogy.
Well, okay, politics is such a big word in Magic, and so we should start out by kind of defining what the point of politics is. What is it, and what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so I don't know about you. I think I'll go first. So for me, politics are not necessarily finessing the table, right? But making agreements with the table to use resources you may not necessarily have at your disposal to make trades that would benefit multiple parties where ideally from a gameplay standpoint, you break some kind of parity and gain more than your counterpart. So an example of this would be, let's say, Cole, you decide you want to attack me, and we're in a 4-person pod. Well, maybe I don't have removal for the creature that you are going to attack me with, but another player has that removal, and I could convince them to use their removal on your creature in exchange for something I might have, whether that's a contract of behavior, like I'm not going to attack them on my turn, or maybe I've got a resource like, hey, myself and another player draw a card, sort of like a Lorn of the Third Path kind of situation where we're, I could target you to draw cards, stuff like that, where we're trading resources to kind of get what we want out of a particular situation.
So I think that's a great definition. I see you're approaching it from a standpoint of like, I want something, how am I going to get it out of you? And it, like, you use some words there. The key word I picked up was finesse, and there's a lot to unpack here. I don't think that it has to be about finessing. I don't think politics has to be about like tricking somebody, and even like breaking parity sometimes isn't the goal. My definition, I just went as broadly as I could, was like, you're basically working together to achieve a like-minded goal. And whether that's like, I don't want you to kill me. That's you want to kill me. Well, let's try to get to a middle ground where I don't die and you're happy about it. So whether that's like surviving another turn or disarming a conflict, saying like, hey man, I know we've been butting heads a little bit, but this is a gesture of goodwill or good faith. Or like the iconic working together to remove something that's holding you both down. Like, I maybe have a way to get rid of like hexproof or indestructible on somebody's commander, but I have no way to remove the creature. Like, can we come to an agreement, use our resources to achieve a like-minded goal of killing Cory's commander for the 50th time and making it cost 106 mana?
Joke's on you, it's Yuriko, so you can kill as much as you want and it won't go up. You know what's interesting about that? So by your definition, it's rallying to a common cause.
For the most part, but that I want it to be clear that your common cause doesn't have to be beneficial for both people. Like, I can rally you to not kill me, or I can threaten you to send your resources elsewhere.
Well, so the reason I hone in on that one particular point is because if you look at most Commander games, I would argue, at least on the casual level, there's typically one player that kind of pulls ahead as a threat to the table at a given point of the game.
Sure.
And all the players kind of go, oh, that's the threat. We should all kind of team up to stamp them back down to reality.
The arch enemy moment.
Yeah, and that in itself actually is a political maneuver. Is somebody has to be the first person to go, hey, Cole's the threat, and get the other two people at the table to go, yes, he is the threat. We should focus our resources on whittling him down.
I'll tell you, I vastly prefer it when somebody else at the table says, no, Cole isn't the threat. We should focus our resources elsewhere. Actually, that never happens enough.
What usually happens when we play is we draw our opening hand, and then I just go, guys, Cole's the threat. Let's take him down.
Honestly, I think a lot of times by the time the opening hand is pulled, I'm already salty. I'm already toxic. But I think that's actually a really good starting point. Like, when is the start of politics? And I have an idea of, basically assuming, like if your politics kind of apply to two different realms, like your own play group that you play with all the time. I know all the cards in your deck. I know what makes you tick, and I can break you apart like something that can be broken apart.
Sure.
A Lego structure. Yeah, a puzzle. Honestly, anything there. But and then there's also, I'm at an LGS. I've never met any of these people before. I'm maybe playing my first game with total strangers. So politics, I think, starts the moment you sit down, or kind of the moment you make contact with the people you're going to be playing with. And if you're, pleasant out the gate, that's going to vastly impact the way that the people play around you or play, with you. So like you can set yourself up for success by coming in with a smile, shaking hands, learning people's names, or you can kind of make yourself a target by, being the donkey of the table and just not being friendly. I'm more likely to take you out than my good friend of 10 years.
I like that you bring this up. Like that's your first political moment, and so at an LGS, you want me to believe that you show up with a smile on your face, shake hands, and sit down. Is this the
Yeah, I would
no
say
no? Is this your personal move?
it's maybe a little bit more fist bumping in a COVID era, but I do like to know people's names. I hate the whole like, oh, I'll swing at you. Like I think it's better to saying somebody's name. People, if that's a magic spell in itself. Like people love to hear their own name, and so you can kind of build rapport and get onto that ally level with
See,
strangers.
I'm gonna counter your move with my move, right? So you talk about coming to an LGS, big smile on your face, super friendly, get to know people's name, really bond with them on a personal level.
Right.
No, this is the political move. You come in as a heel, like in wrestling.
Okay.
You have a title belt over one shoulder. Doesn't matter what it's a title of. You get entry music. You need a hype man with a boombox. It's just hyping you up as you walk in. You plunk your deck down. Actually, I think is even better. You open the front of the belt. It's in the belt buckle. You pull your deck
Oh
out.
my God. Oh, he just said that. clip
you,
that. Clip that.
you put it down on the table. You learn none of their names, and you just say things like, "I'm gonna take you out, brother. You're going down."
I think that's actually disregard my points. Adopt that persona and see how fast you get kicked out of every LGS in your local municipality.
Yeah, yeah, the whole municipality. They're actually calling city council and going like, no, no, no. We're gonna need SWAT at every LGS just in case this guy comes around. Go ahead and post his picture everywhere.
In my dream world, there's going to be eyeball identification to get into your LGS.
I mean, but you're absolutely right in the sense that knowing someone's name is a very simple way to go a long way, if that makes sense. So being able to sit down, even when you go to like command fests and different events, I mean, what's the first thing you do when you sit down? Oh, hey, nice to meet you. My name's Corey. Oh, what deck are you playing? Oh, I've never seen that commander
You
before.
do a
Blah
little
blah
cheeky
blah.
banter, a little cheeky banter.
Uh-huh. And now what I'm learning is I thought you were just a friendly guy. I didn't realize that it was all a stratagem from the beginning.
Oh, by all means. As soon as the name is in my database, I'm deciphering your biggest weaknesses. I go for that crushing grip, or you grab them right by the tip of their fingers so that they can't squeeze back. To establish dominance at the table. Everything is a microaggression, and everything is a microtransaction. I'm also charging them Venmo and real cash for my kindness. That's a political strategy.
You're like
Offer them money.
You're like the Seto Kaiba of Magic the Gathering events.
Burning Power 9, burning duels to gain favor of my opponents.
There's no bad cards in my grandfather's deck, Kaiba. But beyond that, okay, so you've met the person. For me, I think the politics really starts about turn 1, turn 2, right? When you're actually in the game. Now, having a great demeanor just goes a long way in a personal sense. But now let's talk about buttering up the table, right? When you got the goods on the table, Cole, that's when the actual politics begins. So you got to get those turn 1, turn 2 plays out. They can sort of start tilting and gifting stuff, which is why when I have my dedicated politic decks, it's all about having a low curve and giving people stuff. You have no idea. Well, maybe you do because we play a lot together. Do you know how far I can get on a 3 mana rock like Victory Chimes that just lets me give people 1 mana?
I know how
or
far
a
you can try to get with every potential interaction
everything?
on every turn cycle for the entire game. Yeah, I'm very familiar.
You say try, but I think what you meant to say is do. How far I do get on every interaction.
I swear I've heard this man say, if you don't attack me for the next 10 turns, I'll give you one colorless mana right now. Like the stakes are not that
Okay.
high, but like
Well,
sometimes. Hmm,
let's talk real terms of real political examples, right?
sure.
So I have done things to you in a political arena that you have to own up to, which is, I think one of our earliest memories of playing together is when we went to our first command fest and I worst feared copied around the table, and then the third person who could have gotten a target put on his back went, no, that's okay. And when you went to counter the worst fears that targeted you, he countered your counter spell just to make it happen.
Right.
These political curries of favor that I get throughout the board just by screwing with other people.
That's 100% true, but that is a much larger scenario than a victory chimes single colorless turn or mana on everybody's turn. I
Yeah, but
have
I've gotten a lot of traction out of that too.
I got a little question for you in regards to like some more of this minutia of the beginning turns. In the beginning
Mhm.
of the game, everybody's playing their low mana curve dorks. I'm dropping a Land of War Elves. Maybe I'm the only person to have a dork that doesn't have a summoning sickness on turn one or like on turn two. If
Mhm.
I'm swinging this at you, are you trying to politic me out of that 1 point of damage on turn two? Are you trying to get me to swing elsewhere, and do you think you can kind of garner an advantage out of enough of those Llanowar elves attack triggers?
Yeah, you can. Um, but I would make the argument that you don't make that political play to get someone to not attack you. I think, like, okay, cards on the table. I gotta tell you the dealer's secret, right? The secret in the early game is about establishing who could be the threat based off of what deck they're playing or who they are. Like, especially if you know the pod, it's who they are, right? So it's not so much about you attack me with a Llanowar elves and I try and defend you from attacking me for one.
Uh
So
huh.
much as is about if you have the Llanowar elves, making a point instead of going like, oh, I'm gonna roll a die, and if it's one and two, three, four, whatever, I'm gonna hit you or you or you around the table. It's well, guys, I'm gonna have to swing at Cole first because Cole's got the most threatening commander. Oh, so I'm gonna do that 1 point of damage to get things started because we gotta hit him fast and hard and early before he gets this big threatening commander out.
You're trying
So
to
you're
get
already
the
planting the
mob's
psyche.
torches on fire. You're
Yes.
trying to get their pitchforks sharpened before the gears of the game are moving.
Yeah, and I mean, we can break into this a little later, right? Because there's a big conversation around like what's politics versus bluffing versus lying going on Twitter and on different social medias right now about Magic.
Right.
But I think if you're being honest about it, like if you legit have the most threatening commander, the first political move you can do is draw attention to the person who has the most threatening commander and then go, I'm attacking. You know why I'm attacking Cole? And you sell the other two players, I'm attacking Cole for the benefit of the table. I'm doing it for the greater good.
Now, I'll only say that that's a strategy that can kind of backfire because now if you're the only person talking smack, if I have I can only your stance can be, hey, I'm just playing the game, I'm not gonna draw attention to myself, or if like for instance, you don't have to establish who the biggest threat is if you have kind of an inkling that maybe you want to benefit from them being the biggest threat. I want to help this guy get to a point where he can kill everybody else, and then I can take the win from there.
What's funny is you got to do it in a two-parter, right? You were talking about establishing who's the biggest threat. You also have to loudly and proudly establish that you're not the threat.
Right, even though you
Guys, I'm
just
not the
played a
threat.
Mana Crypt, a Jeweled Lotus, and a Soul Ring, and were able to get out Toxaril on turn two.
Yeah, you know why I'm not the threat at that point, Cole?
Why is that?
Listen to the example you gave. I played a land, a mana crypt, a soul ring, into a toxel. I probably had to get like a dark ritual or something
No,
in
this
there
is
too
this
to
is
get
turn
enough
two.
mana.
It's turn two. So you have two lands. You
Okay.
played the Soul Ring on
I got
turn
2 lands.
one. So you have
Sure.
two mana from Soul Ring, 2 mana from from the Mana Crypt, 3 mana
Uh,
from the Jeweled Lotus.
see,
It's perfectly reasonable
no,
play.
no,
Turn
no.
two
Here's
Toxtril.
why I'm not the threat. Here is why I'm not the threat.
Uh-huh.
I'm out of steam. I have nothing in my hand.
That's true, but
Not the
a
threat.
tox
Not
roll on
the
the
threat.
board is regardless of what's in your hand, you're making the slug. I mean, this is a whole nother discussion, but you'd be making the slug tokens that, from
You
killing
know
people's
why?
creatures, and you'd be able
No,
to
no, no,
draw
no, no,
cards
no.
with tox roll's inherent abilities.
I'm
So
not
even
the
then,
threat.
you're even more the threat.
I'm not the threat, and I'll tell you why. I'm not the threat because it's only turn 2. You haven't had a chance to put anything in play that I could kill with Toxrill. Therefore, I'm not drawing any
I'm
cards.
playing a tapped Golgari Rot Farm, dude, and I'm not going to be making any plays until turn 5. So.
Okay, so I'm not the threat because there's nothing on your board that Toxrill could get rid of. Not the threat. I'm not your threat.
All right, all
See?
right, all right.
See?
But that actually does highlight a good point of like it's kind of political to sandbag the stuff that you play. You know, playing things a way ahead of curve can draw attention to yourself, making you that obvious threat, and that is kind of a political play of like maybe metering out the cards. You don't have to windmill slam everything onto the table as soon as you have the mana for it if it's going to garner a lot of attention. Like there have been studies about, you know, Soul Ring or whatever that like turn 1 Soul Rings often lose the game because it's like, oh, you just garner that much more hatred from the table by being like maybe play it on turn 2 and you could garner some political favor. Oh, look what I just drew, is a little cheekier than like, sorry guys, turn 1 Soul Ring.
No, you're absolutely right. I've definitely, as I've gotten more savvy in my Magic playing career, I've definitely drawn Soul Rings in my opening hand and then held them for not necessarily. I won't say turn 3 or 4, but I've definitely held them to turn 2 at least. Where it's
You
like,
could resist
oh,
for that long, you brave man.
yeah, I know. Especially if you have like I think my new favorite turn 1 play, by the way, if I have Soul Ring in a hand, is if I have a tapped land. Because then I play the tap land and I look at it like, well, I couldn't have played this Soul Ring anyways. Haha.
I mean, depending on what's in your hand, there are times that that's ideal and times that that's not. But it's definitely a worthwhile thing to consider, is that the speed of that you play your cards is going to impact people's perception of like who they should attack. I'm more likely to attack the person who's ramping, regardless of the number of cards in hand, just because I know you're getting to that advantageous position. That's assuming I don't know the cards in everybody's deck, or I don't have an obvious target against me, like somebody's commander that counters my strategy or something.
Let me ask you this one, because I think this is also a bit of a controversy around politics. And I'll say politics in quotes here. Where do you stand on bluffing?
So yeah, I think bluffing is like obviously a political tool. So an example of bluffing is like, oh, don't swing that at me. I'm gonna remove it. I have a Swords to Plowshare. If you swing it somewhere else, I won't remove it. And you can bluff, and every play you make, you can always bluff that you have something that you don't. But if somebody calls your bluff and you do not have it, the next time you say, hey, don't swing at me, I have a Swords to Plowshares, it's not going to stand up to my wolf blowing down a house of twigs. I understand that's only maybe a 50, if it's happened, you've made the threat twice. It's only happened 0 times. That's a chance I'm willing to take. Make them have it is kind of the thought there.
So my thought on that is, so the example used is like, hey, if you attack me, I'm going to use Swords to Plowshares or something like that.
Sure.
I think if you use a specific threat like that, I don't know if it, like, at what point does bluffing cross the line into like, I'm lying, right? And I get that it's a game, so there's like less moral nuance to it, right? But like, let me give you an example, and I want to see where you think on this.
Sure.
So if you go, hey, I'm going to attack you, like you threaten that you're going to do something to me, right? I've got 2 blue mana up. which is the common, like he's got a counter spell.
What are you going to do with a counterspell if I'm attacking you? Maybe you're going to
No.
individual Psychrift my creature back to my hand.
Right. Right. What I'm saying is, let's say you threaten to do something to me, and I'm like, hey, I got 2 blue mana up, whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between holding 2 blue mana up intentionally just to psych someone out, and a difference between, well, if you play that, I'm going to counterspell it. Because then, like I think you get more mileage out of the mind game of like, I've got 2 blue mana open, and if somebody brings up, oh, well, if I play this, are you going to counterspell? And you just go, I don't know. Am I? I could.
So yeah, and I do want to specify that I was stating from the perspective of I do not like, I do not think bluffing is effective, and that what I had said about like, oh, I will swords to plowshares you is like, that's a bad example of it's more of a lie than a bluff, I guess, in that if you don't have the swords to plowshares. But I do agree with you that there's maybe more subtle ways that you can bluff somebody out without even speaking. You could just kind of gesture like, oh, if you're trying to bait out a counterspell or so, or like, make somebody believe that you have a counterspell, as soon as they're tapping all their mana, you pick up your hand and you kind of like, pull a card to the front of it, and then you get ready to tap your 2 blue mana. You can do it in a ham-fisted way and be pretty obvious, or you can kind of have little things like that, like, oh, you're attacking me, and then now I look at my hand and check how much mana I have. Maybe I won't attack you. That sort of thing. Like, you can redirect without even opening your pie hole.
Yeah. So I think what we're looking at, though, what we're kind of talking about is more of the non-verbal physical politics to it all. But what about on the cards? Because if we're really looking at politics as if I'm going to build a political deck, like so the examples we're talking about, right? You could be political in any deck, because I could keep, as long as I'm in blue, keep 2 islands open and be like, and keep looking at the one card in my hand over and over again just to fake you out. But if I want to build a politics specific deck, what kind of effects would you consider a political effect?
Well, so, okay. I mean, that's a really interesting question, because I think like there's a bit of confusion between politics and group hug. Having the ability to give beneficial, like having the ability to make people draw cards can be with like a temple bell or something where everybody's benefiting from it. That's explicitly group hug. But maybe I have a card that, like you said earlier, Lauren of the Third Path, that I could make, target player draw a card. I can help you out if you're 1 mana short, or I can help you, help you get to that gas. I think having cards in your deck that are like blatantly helping other people kind of puts you more into that like group hug element. But I think there's political ways you can use cards in your deck that are not inherently political. Like any removal spell can become like, hey, I can save you from this, from dying to commander damage, or we can work together to, use our cards to get to a greater goal. If you're trying to have like a political deck, obviously we mentioned voting earlier, and having, people like that. That's kind of the definition of politics, is like democracy, people, getting, but for the most part, those voting effects benefit you or benefit you. So I would say to have the most political deck, you'd probably want to have the most interactive deck. You want cards that can like interact with other people's turns. I think a prime example, and it's unfortunate because I'm actually like not a huge fan of him, but Kenrith, the Returned King, who can give, he can make a target player draw a card, can reanimate a player's creatures from the grave, can put 1/1 counters on stuff. But like 99% of the time, the best call is to like use those abilities on yourself. So you have to find real scenarios where I want to spend 5 mana to reanimate my opponent's creature back to their field. But if it's like maybe their opponent's creature has an ETB that it's a Rec Sage, like, hey Cory, I will reanimate your Rec Sage to your battlefield, but can you use the trigger to destroy somebody's Phyrexian altar or something like that?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, you brought up a good point with the group hug versus politics, because I think group hug gets kind of lumped in from time to time. But I think the big difference for me is one word, right? It comes down to control.
Mm.
Like if you do a temple bell, like is the one you just brought up. So temple bell, for you guys who don't know, it's a artifact. You can tap it. Everybody draws a card. Like every single player draws a card. That's group hug because you can't necessarily break the parity of it. I mean, you can if you had some stuff that like prevents people from drawing cards, I guess.
And you could be advantageous about like, hey, I will tap Temple Bell on your turn to draw you the card rather than the end step before I untap or something like that.
Yeah, but overall, it's a group hug card because it's affecting everybody equally. But things like Lauren, it's you and target opponent, so you're kind of choosing who gets the added benefit. Or if you look at, you brought up Kenrith as like a good commander for politics. The one that always comes to mind for me is Shadrix Silver Quill, which is the Orzhov dragon. It's like, oh, you got to pick different opponents, and each person gets like different modes and stuff.
Right.
I mean, that's political because you could sit there and go, hey, look, I could pick any one of you three opponents to get this benefit. Who's going to be the highest bidder if you want to get a counter on your stuff, or you want to draw a card, or you want to get inklings. So those kind of things really are more political more political to me because you're controlling who gets what resource at what time.
Yeah, and at that point, you're kind of able to dip your finger into different pies, and you can you can pull the strings. You could be the guy, puppeteering the actual gameplay while you look like a hero, or like you're helping people by giving them small benefits. It's like it's all about kind of those like how micro interpretations of all of your actions can change. If somebody thinks that you're too much of a threat, or if somebody thinks like, hey, you're helping that guy too much, I'm more likely to now want to attack you, because it's like it can quickly look like, if I'm not getting interacted with, and I'm watching you buff this guy's creatures, or I'm watching you buff this, give this guy good card draw, it can sometimes start to look like a two-headed giant game. And at that point, it's not necessarily a fun time for everybody involved. It's like, obviously there are a lot of scenarios where that 3v1 arch enemy, like we all team up to take down the guy who's just running away with the game. But if you come in to this game thinking like, oh, I'm going to play Glunch the Bestower, and I'm only going to like help, my buddy. It's like, okay, well, to some extent, why not just play two-headed giant? Or, like if your politics are bad, I'm going to be aggroed on you because you're kind of like, you're harshing the direction of the game.
Yeah, I think that's a key point too, because what I've definitely gotten better at is when I play politics. And when I play politics, I will say this is a fairly frequent.
For Cory, it's every game has elements of politics, but Cory he ramps it up to 100 in every game.
But what I've definitely gotten better is kind of being like equal opportunity with my politics, where it's not necessarily like, hey, you're the benefactor of my patronage, and you're just going to get all the benefits. Because, yeah, you're right. It then becomes two-headed giant. No, I'm whoever is the threat, I'm going to go give my blessings onto the rest of the table. And then when they're not the threat, guess what? They're back in my good books. And then somebody else that got all the love is now on the outs.
Yeah, a huge part of Magic, like whether you like it or not, is in-game memory. If you're messing with me a lot in the beginning of the game, I might be the kind of person that I can like come around and we're homies by the end of the game. It's all smiles, and I like to try my best to be that person. But sometimes somebody just does you so dirty in a game that you physically cannot stop tapping your creatures in their direction. And so I think that's a really good point of like, it should be a fluid like political sphere of like, you could have somebody be, the arch enemy, and then they get beaten down, and then they are obviously not the arch enemy anymore. And we're kind of changing where the threat assessment goes. But it entirely depends on your play group as to whether or not like there's going to be a grudge there. And I say a grudge in the lightest possible terms. But it goes the opposite way too. Of if you're so nice to somebody early in the game, you're probably going to be the one they try to kill last. And so a little niceness can go a long way. Politics can do you one or the other.
Yeah, I think is a good point too, which is politics can be both lifting two players and also removing something, right? Because you could look at politics in things like Wedding Ring as an example where you have one and you give a token copy to somebody else and then you're both drawing cards. There's things like that where, hey, you're giving everybody resources. There's also politics in the removal sense, which are more, I won't say negative, but they're going to be negative on the amount of resources on board, I guess.
Right.
So if we look, I guess this is a bad analogy, but if you looked at it in a positive negative light, right, where positive is adding resources or card advantage to the board and negative is subtracting presence from the board.
Sure.
You can play politics in both ways. And I think the best decks straddle both those lines, right? Like my most political decks have huge removal packages. I mean, like 20 removal cards, stuff like that. Because I also operate my politics on the mindset that you make good on your promises and you make good on your threats.
Sure.
So, we talked about like, hey, if you attack me, I could do this. And if you get caught with your pants down bluffing it so many times, eventually they're like, I don't know, maybe one time he does Swords to Plowshares me, but I could attack 4 out of 5 times safe. So I'm just going to attack, and maybe the one time it bites me, right?
It's some serious
but if it's the opposite,
boy who cries wolf scenario.
Yeah, but if it's the opposite, right? Like 4 out of 5 times you're going to get blown up after I tell you not to bother me, then you're really going to think about not bothering me.
Your word carries more weight to it. And
yeah.
I don't know if you now this is going to be a plug to the book The Four Agreements, which I don't know if you've read that, but it's a really it's a fantastic it's a fantastic book. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz, and it's all about like the 4 secrets to essentially like happiness. And one of they can all maybe be applied to Magic, but the one that definitely applies to Magic is be impeccable with your word. As soon as you break a promise or like you make a deal and then kind of go back on it, it's like I am less likely, and everybody at the table is going to include that in their perception of should I interact with this person on a political landscape going forward. Like it's people have really good memories, and so if you are kind of shifty about the terms of your deal, I'm maybe going to look a lot closer at the things you say when we're across from each other on the Magic table.
Well, let's be clear here, right? If you go into a deal and you on the Magic table, I mean in any arena, but we're focus on the Magic table here. But if you go into a deal, like, hey, if you do blank, I won't attack you till next turn, or if you don't mess with this, I'll remove that.
Right.
And you want to uphold your end of it. That's not a political choice not to uphold your end of it. That's just being a bad table etiquette person.
Yeah, it's like it kind of disrupts the flow of the game, because it's like, well, let's like we talked about earlier, like bluffing versus lying. It's like, well, you lied to me. You took advantage of my trust in you, and I lowered my defenses, and you said I was you weren't going to kill me, and kind of okay. So real quick, I think it's important to talk about like when it gets down to that 1v1 point, deals kind of evaporate. It's like, how can you like, oh, I said I wasn't going to kill you, but now it's literally just the two of us here. Like at what point, obviously there's room for it to be like, oh, hey man, don't kill me. It gets down to the final 3 people. I can kill Cory, but if I kill Cory, then Tyler kills me because my defenses are down. So I want to be able to establish a safe, instead of being in this standoff, I want to be able to maybe get to a point where we can trust that if I handle Cory, that I get a turn of leeway. But how can I, when the goal of the game is to take out all your opponents, and I would be, right for the picking?
So this is where I think it comes down to resource management. And this is going to seem like a weird sort of pitch, but I want to see want to explain to you my logic, and I want to see what you kind of think about it, right?
Sure.
So this is the same issue that goad decks run into, right? Because when it's 4 people, you can goad and they all attack, but when it's 1v1, your goad commander doesn't really do anything for you unless it's got some second line of text. The goad aspect isn't really benefiting you in any way.
Sure.
When you look at a politics deck, I think the key is you need to put a value on the asset. What I mean by that is you want to look at your removal, your card draw, in your ramp, and you want to put some kind of value on what it's worth, right? So if I trade
Sure.
you card draw, like, hey, I'm going to let you draw a card, I'm going to draw a card. In a politics deck, that card draw is lower on the point scale to me than removal is. So not only are you trying to curry favor throughout the game, but I think when you get to the end, where you're down to the 1v1 or the 1v1v1, where everybody's at like sub 10 life or something like that.
Yeah.
The goal should be that you have more removal than your opponents do. So how I would recommend you start going that way, and this might be like peeling back the curtain to Oz a little bit.
Right.
But I would say your goal would be when you make trades throughout the game, it should be things like, hey, I'm going to help you draw a card. If I help you draw cards, can you remove X? Right? Because not only are you currying the favor by helping them draw a card or giving them mana, but you're also making them burn a removal spell and destroy a threat in the moment.
Sure.
So hopefully when you get to the end, you're still clutching your Swords of Plowshares, your Path to Exiles, all those hyper efficient ones. Whereas they're out of that removal, and that gives you an opportunity to kind of punch holes in the board without being interacted with.
Yeah, so that's actually a super solid point, and kind of a survival tactic in an MTG is like, if you are able to convince somebody else to use their removal on a threat that's both affecting, or that's affecting the both of you, then and you get to keep your removal, you are in such an advantageous position when the tables turn and it's just the two of you left. And so kind of like currying favor with people so that you can get on to that point where like, hey man, we have to remove this, and meanwhile you're holding a Chaos Warp in hand but you don't want to use it. That is a bluff, because you're bluffing that you don't have removal, but it's like it just puts you in such an advantageous position.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wouldn't even say it's a bluff, because you're not really saying I don't have removal. You're just asking the question, right? Hey, who can help remove this?
It's the power of suggestion. If you like, if you can remove it yourself, you'd say, "Oh, I can remove this," or like you're trying to like bait out if anybody else has removal.
Sure. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. So if I go, hey guys, we need to get rid of this Blightsteel Colossus or this Vendrick Zendikar or whatever it is, and the person next to me goes, oh, well, I can remove it on my turn, but I'm like 1 mana short. Dun, 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 victory chimes, and you go, hey, I can throw this your way if you agree to remove that. And you're getting a threat off the board, they're burning a removal spell, and you're, like you said, holding onto your Chaos Warp or whatever the spell may be. And the same goes for, I think, attacking. Like when it comes to attacking and defending, because there is a political nature to attacking when you don't necessarily need to. And there's also a political nature to when you choose to take damage. So, for example, do you know how many times you get to the end of a game and you're like, hey, you're going to swing all out at me and win, but I've been sandbagging my Ink Shield or my, Batwing Broom or a Fog or something like that just for this moment. So you turn everything sideways, I fog, and then suddenly I swoop the wind out from underneath you.
Yeah, I mean it's always a good feeling, when you get to that point. But it's a matter of like if you can survive to that point. And so like you mentioned earlier, those. Like if you choose to take the damage, I think a large portion of political interactions come from, I have a combat damage trigger, I need to attack, I have an attack trigger, and nobody has any creatures. I say, hey Cory, I know you could block this and kill it, you have 1 million creatures and you're very handsome, but if I swung my like Cold-Eyed Selkie at you, would you take the damage so that I could draw a card? It's like, in those scenarios, that's like an option to kind of build rapport by choosing to take damage. But then when you get to that like into the game, it's like, man, that 2 damage or that one extra that combustible gear hole trigger or whatever, like that really makes the difference.
Well, and I think too that's why if you look at a lot of political decks, I mean, and this is going to vary depending on their colors, obviously, but I feel like a lot of political decks also come with like a pillow fort kind of sub theme. So you'll see, when you think political, you usually think Orzhov is the first color combination or Mardu, but you usually see them with like, hey, I have a ghostly prison, or if I'm in blue, I've got a propaganda, or Kazul of the cliffs or whatever. If you're in red,
yeah, you got the Windborn Muse, you got the Sphere of Safety, you got the Cuskoon Falls, you got the there's everything.
Yeah, so I mean that's usually why those exist, along with we just talked about fogs having an ink shield or something like that floating around. Is because you're going to get to a certain point where you're 1v1, you're not politicking your way out of it. So you go, well, I'm going to hunker in and good luck. I'm going to hunker in, make it extremely difficult to attack me. And then I'm going to sit back with my arsenal of removal and hopefully start blowing holes that I can attack through.
I have a secret technique as well that I would like to unveil, to the whole world. And this is it's a non-zero chance of success. It doesn't always work, but I like to consider the plead step, the step where I plead for my life. I beg for you not to kill me or to not remove my thing, please. You get down on your hands and knees and throw yourself up to the sky. Like if you can beg hard enough, sometimes you can get out of like potential removal or just straight up damage. And it also like it comes to, I gotta say, it comes from my buddy that I initially got into playing Commander with, Devin. We used to have a lot of games where it was 1v1. It would be like 2:00 in the morning and we'd both have 80% of our decks on the field, and it'd be like that, hey man, just give me one more turn. Like, I know you're going to kill me, but just give me one more turn to do something cool, to do something fun. And then whatever happens after you do something cool or fun is kind of like, that's like free real estate, man. If you happen to win the game, you can feign ignorance. So
you're like, I just happen to have this coalition victory. Whoa.
It's a non-zero chance of success.
You know what's funny? It is a non-zero chance of success because I actually had that work in my favor recently. So I was on a stream, and when I say I was out of gas, Cole, I was out of gas. Like all my lands were tapped. I had nothing in my hand. I think I had like a creature on the field. And it was one of those like, all right, we're at the late game. I didn't really have anything going on all game, but I've existed to this point.
Sure.
And the other person was going to swing out and basically take me and player 4 out and just leave it as a 1v1.
Yeah, we've all been there.
And then they go, all right, well, I'm going to swing out, is this going to take out Cory? And I said, wait, but hear me out. Remember the good times we've had? Remember all the laughter we had throughout the last hour of streaming? You couldn't, you might choose not to attack me. And they sat there on live stream for a good like 3 or 4 minutes waffling while I pleaded out my case, and then they didn't attack me. And I think it was the greatest bit of content I've probably ever created.
That's beautiful. I'm super happy to hear that. It's always good to survive.
I came in 3rd place. But I did make it one more turn to only draw and brick with nothing.
But that's the one turn that counts. Like, and at the end of the day, that what can happen in one turn? Anything. You could even draw a card and play a land.
Is this like a greater philosophy? It's not the wins that you collect; it's the turns you play the game.
That's I think that's a great mindset. To be honest with you, it's a little unrelated to our point, but just like enjoying the game when you have those crazy plays and taking that as a victory, that helps facilitate a good attitude. And having a good attitude built is an investment for future politics and future games.
Did
So
you know?
be
You
friendly.
know the person.
Huh?
You, you know the person that comes in second in the game has played the same amount of turns in Magic as the person that wins.
Well, like been around for the same amount of turns, but
That's what I mean. They play the same amount of Magic.
well, that's just inherently not true. If you win on turn one before I've played a single land, we have not played the same amount of Magic. I observed you playing Magic, but I did not. I didn't get a turn.
Yes, much like watching an opponent play an Urza deck, you have observed me play a lot of Magic. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I take your stunned silence to mean that I politicked you out of this conversation.
I think that's a good segue into maybe kind of the politics at the end of the game, like shaking hands, smiling, saying good game, and respecting. Like if a person wins, they should have an opportunity to revel in their victory. Like, oh man, that was a really cool play. And like doing that and kind of like, well, maybe let somebody like let you have that cool moment, later down in the line. And obviously you don't want to let them or have them let you have it. You want to earn your victories, but the positive social interactions benefit everybody, politically and not politically.
You when you win the game and you're like, man, that was a cool play I pulled off at the end, blah blah blah. You don't want me to jut in and go, well, I let you win because if it had made it to my turn, I would have won by meh, meh, blah blah blah. That super classy move.
It's not a good look. It's not a good look.
I like that you started this conversation with the politics of walking in with a big smile and shaking everyone's hand, and you end with the politics of have a big smile and shake everyone's hand so that you get invited to the next game.
I don't know, man. It sounds like there's something to that. I would like give it a try. Go to your local your local LGS game store, and see how it works out.
You'll see me there. I'll be the guy with like knee-high boots, a little spandex whitey tighty, and a belt. I'll be walking in with my John Cena music.
You're gonna maybe get a lifetime ban from Cool Stuff Inc. They've called me couple times about that because they've had a hard time getting to you. You've blocked them on every social media outlet. So
it's it's which I have not, by the way. Cool Stuff, reach out. We need to make things happen. But yeah, no, it's sort of like the opposite, right? Like you'll never guess where that Toxtrol deck came from. But I think what closing thoughts here, Cole? So politics, love them, hate them, or is this a vote for or against politics?
I think politics are great, but it's really important to kind of meter out how much you're using. If you over politic and you talk too much, it means the quality of your word gets lowered. If you're overly political, it can kind of bite you in the butt because people don't like to be interfered with the entire game or like collaborated against the entire game. There likes to be a little bit of back and forth. Politics can accomplish anything, and every interaction, whether you like it or not, is like it's going to affect people's perception of or in-game perception of you. And so even if it's not explicitly politics, it has like some sort of element of like sway. Like if you attack me one more time, I'm that much more likely to attack you. So it's not necessarily a political thing, but more just like a reaction. But the secret to becoming more political is probably having the more interaction, because 99% of politics just comes down to like who has an answer, or do you have an answer? Can you get more value for it? And like thinking of your in-game actions for all of their worth versus just the text on the card, the mental impact.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to the mental impact, like you said, or the trading aspect of it. So you always want to get people to use more resources than you use, but also you have to do it in a way that these people don't necessarily feel like they're cheated. You can't just be like, you use all your removal and I give you nothing for it. And then obviously you have to be able to understand your gameplay scenario. And I don't mean that on just the table, but if you are with your regular group of friends and you politic a little too much, that can transcend from game to game. So the next game they're going to remember, hey, well, last time you politicked and blah blah blah. Whereas an LGS, maybe you smoke somebody and get away with it.
Sure.
Not that I'm recommending that. I'm just saying, you could in theory.
If you're never going to play with anybody again, like the same people again, you can lie all you want and get the value out of it and have no repercussions. And it's awesome and it's fair and it's how Richard Garfield intended.
That's actually why. So what I do is I put a paper bag over my head and I fly into a city I'll never go to again. Like, let's say Topeka, Kansas. And I go to an LGS with that bag over my head.
Topeka heads.
Yeah, sorry, Topekians. And then I go to that LGS and I pull out all my anti cards, just like Richard Garfield intended. Then I smoke them with my politics, and then I leave town and I light all the cornfields ablaze behind me.
I was gonna say, I'd rather watch you smoke an anti-card like it were a cigar, and then walk into an LGS in your weird knee-high boots costume you described earlier. And
actually, the knee-high boot costume comes with its own paper bag over it. That way I can't be associated with.
Also, that's my question. Are you wearing the paper bag on the flight? Like, you specified that you put on the paper bag, then you visit the city you're never going to go back to, and then you scorn Kansas, and then you do your whole thing.
Yes, you understood correctly. I wear it on the flight in.
You raise the fields for no reasons.
I raise the fields. I salt the earth. But yeah, you heard correctly. I wear the paper bag to and from. That way, no one at the airport knows who I am either. Actually,
is this not really like a TSA thing? Like, are you not getting stopped?
It's real convenient when your driver's license also has you with a paper bag over its head.
You just sound like a threat to international security, my man. Or I guess domestic homeland security. If it's going to be Topeka, Kansas, watch out.
Hey, don't dox me. Don't tell them I'm also still in the U.S. It could be international. I could be anywhere. But with that being said, let's get into question of the week and card of the week. Cole, question of the week comes to us from a Wallace out on Twitter.
What's up?
So Wallace, I would venture to say a Wally, but we'll stick with Wallace because that's what their actual screen name says.
Sure.
Wallace would like to know, or says, Magic has influenced a lot of Sorry, it's phrased a little weird. Hang on. Magic has influenced a lot of mechanics in different TCGs over the years, but what is an innovation / mechanic from other TCGs you would like to see make their way into Magic?
Oh, easy. Pendulum summoning from Yu-Gi-Oh!
100%.
No, I'm just kidding. That's actually a super interesting question, Wallace. I was kind of worried it was going to go the other way and ask like what other TCG mechanics that like have been influenced by Magic. I'm like, I honestly have no idea. But I've mentioned it a couple times on several other episodes that I used to be an avid Yu-Gi-Oh player, and I am a huge fan of kind of those like crazy combo plays that revolve around like named cards and cards that kind of like.
I thought for a second you were gonna be like, I'm a big fan of combo decks. Those don't exist in Magic at all. There's never any kind of combo in Magic.
Well, no, I would never lie to you. I would only bluff to you, and even then, I don't bluff. I love like the fun aspect of like the extra deck in the Yu-Gi-Oh scene where you have your boss monsters kind of like off to the side. I don't know if I'd want to see that in Commander, and it's almost like we already have that in Commander. Your extra deck is your command zone. But kind of it might be interesting to see a sphere of like more cards that can come from outside of the game, like wish cards, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. What's funny is when I was thinking about this, my mind also went to Yu-Gi-Oh, because that's probably the other card game I have the most experience with.
Sure,
was like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, and now what I thought of was something that kind of sort of exists in Magic, but it doesn't necessarily operate the same way, and that would be trap cards.
Sure. That's a great call.
So yeah, so in Yu-Gi-Oh, for those of you guys who don't play, there's trap cards that you play them face down, and then when an opponent does something or some kind of interaction, you flip them in response.
Well,
That's sort
real
of like
quick,
a trump card.
you have to
Go.
push up your glasses and the light
Oh
shines on
yeah,
them, and then you say, "You've activated my trap card."
yeah. Yes, that's actually exactly how I do it. Um, so those would be interesting in Magic. Now, Magic has traps.
Morphs and the summoning traps and those sort of things. But
Yeah, and I guess like the new plot mechanic from Thunder Junction, you could argue is sort of a trap-esque thing, but it's
what?
really
It's the
more of a
opposite.
combo.
It's face up. Plot is face up. Everybody knows it's not a trap card if you can see it. You ain't flipping
It's combolicious.
shit.
That's your combolicious move. But I mean, like they actually do have trap cards. They got like Mind Break Trap and stuff.
Summoning trap. There's a 5 of them. It's like a cycle of them.
Yeah, but they all tie into like when your opponent does blank. Like isn't Mind Break Trap like when your opponent casts 3 spells or something?
When like 3 or more spells
on
are on the stack, you can cast it for free, and you exile any number of spells from the stack. So it's not a counter spell. It gets around uncounterable. It's pretty chill.
Yeah, but I mean, I kind of like the Yu-Gi-Oh sense of I play a card face down. Oh, you decided to attack me? Welcome to my mirror force.
Which for the uninformed is like essentially a one-sided board wipe that destroys all attacking creatures. It's pretty chill. There is kind of a similar effect, like I mean, all like we were talking, the opposite of plot, but morph, or something that you foretell can kind of give you that same feeling of like flipping it up at instant speed. And Kadena did get a ton of support from the disguise and like that sort of thing in Karlov Manor. So I think we could definitely see some cool reskins. Where's the Yu-Gi-Oh secret layer, man?
It's just Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician, or do you think you get like a Yugi Kaiba Planeswalker?
Oh, I don't know. That might be a fun challenge for the listeners to come up with some Yugi Kaiba Planeswalker abilities.
Here, just off the top of my head, because you brought this up. Here's my pitch to you, right? Modern Horizons 3 has the Flipwalkers coming back.
Right, and they look clean.
Like they do look clean. I mean, I'm not okay, so I don't want to get into leaks on here, right?
We'll have to save that for next episode.
Yeah, but there are leaks out there, and assuming they're accurate, they do look pretty sweet. The one that we do have fully confirmed is a Johnny at this point. So Johnny is a confirmed.
I haven't even seen that one though. I've seen like Grist, Tamio, Soren.
Whoa. You're over here just leaking it up. I just said no leaks. What are you doing?
I'm sorry, man. I have an all leak diet. I wish the viewer could see this, but I actually have a stuff to leak on my desk that I'm holding up to Cory on the camera.
Like you say that like it's a joke, but he actually is holding up a stuffed, like it's like felt. It's a felt leak.
It's actually a really cool story, but I'll save it for another podcast.
But yes, a Johnny is confirmed. That a Johnny is when it enters, he makes like a cat token, and then whenever a cat dies, he flips, and then he becomes like a Boros Planeswalker.
Selesnya? He's not Selesnya. He was always Selesnya.
No, he's hard up Boros. But so with the Flipwalkers, I think what you do is to bring this back to our main point.
Yeah, man, where's this going?
All right, so you have Yugi Moto, little nerd boy, and then he flips into Yami Yugi. Or you got Bakura that flips into Yami Bakura.
Hey, that was a long walk for a ham sandwich. I like the idea, but we'll have to come up with some solid mechanics for him.
So or the flip side is, okay, we know that with Marvel coming out, there's going to have to be an Infinity Gauntlet in the stones, right? Like it just has to exist.
This is prime time material for another episode. We just
get 7 Millennium items. You're right. You're absolutely right. Wallace, thank you for your question of the week. Cole and I have a whole Yugi Magic collaboration to plan out now for a future episode, I guess. And we haven't even gotten out of the Duelist Kingdom arc, because then we got to look at GX, and we got our boy with the Elemental Heroes, Jaden Yuki.
You can't see me, but I'm dead. I've died. I've passed on to the next world.
But hey, Wallace, all seriousness, no. Thank you very much for your question of the week. If you guys want to leave us a question of the week, you can send it to us on Twitter, Instagram, any of the social medias. We'll cover them at the end of the show, but feel free. We do like answering them. Actually, we could arguably say we love answering them because we do them every single episode. Cole, what is this week's brew of the week?
Yeah, so for this week's brew of the week, I'm currently brewing, and I wanted to like bring a little bit of insight into my process. And so I have like a deck that I rarely play. It's been collecting dust. It's been sitting in a part of my drawer that's like hard to get to, and it's my Marin of Clan Toth deck. What? I know. She's a classic commander. If you don't know her, she gives you experience counters whenever a creature you control dies, and at the beginning of your end step, you can return a creature to the graveyard or to the battlefield if you have experience counters that are higher or equal to its CMC, or you can add it to your hand if that isn't the case. It's a classic Golgari Reanimator deck, but I just kind of haven't really been giving it the attention and love it deserves. So Outlaws of Thunder Junction came out. I was scrolling. I'm a scroller. I'm okay with that. And I happened to stumble upon the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. I'm a man who's had a Gitrog deck at a certain time, and it was maybe a little bit too strong. And this is not.
Wait. Huh? But which one did you have? Gitrog? Did you have Gitrog and Thalia, or did you have Git?
Well, it was the OG, the Git Frog, which, relies on a couple of interesting combos, but it's a difficult deck to power down. It's very consistent when you get it going. This Gitrog is a little different. Gitrog, the Ravenous Ride, the Hog Wild Frog, is a black, a green, and 3 for a Trample, Haste, Frog, Horror Mount. Mounts being the new, creature type from Outlaws of Thunder Junction that are, basically function in a way similar to vehicles. But it has Trample and Haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, I can sacrifice another creature that saddled it. And if I do, I draw X cards and put X land cards from my hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. And it's a saddle cost of 1, so it has to be at least 1. And the Gitfrog himself is a 6/5. So like automatically 6/5 for 5 mana Trample Haste is like pretty overpowered, and I'll be the first to admit that. But this is coming from like a Marin, even though I would argue she's extremely fair for this time. She still gets so many groans when she hits the table. So I think that it's okay to play a strong commander.
She reminds me of like the Sin triplets, right? Where in her heyday, everybody hated it, or not necessarily hated, but everybody was like, oh, it's that overpowered commander, that even now that maybe she's been overshined by stronger commanders, people still have that kind of reaction of like, oh, you're playing that deck.
Yeah, and it's like, at what point, are they off the hook for all the pain they caused so many years ago? The vast majority of people who play Commander now have only been playing for a couple of years. They might not have even seen or played against that era of Magic. So it's just crazy to me how much hate some commanders get. But my Marin deck is basically a Golgari birthing pod deck. It's climbing counters by stacking CMCs one after another and pumping out like raid boss style big creatures at the end by bringing out solid ETB and utility creatures in the beginning. The Gitrog, it's a little bit different. It's obviously a little bit more like land based, and it requires those high power creatures. But it wants to play like undercosted raid bosses and sack them and get value. And yeah, I've talked a little bit about it, but I have a Galta Primal Hunger deck that's all about like power and toughness. And this kind of pulls from a lot of that same pool of cards of like Lupine Prototype, like things that cost a little amount of mana for a high stat creature like a 6/6 or a 7/7 that has a downside, like it can't attack or block or until a condition is met. And so Gitrog sacrifices this, draws the cards, and gets the value. But they benefit from a lot of the same like Golgari good stuff. And, that utility like reanimates or like an Eternal Witness or even like a Dictative Erebos to kind of control the board.
I've never heard of Golgari good stuff because I'm pretty sure that phrase only applies to Simic. Only Simic has good stuff, Cole. That's why it's called Simic good stuff.
Well, everybody knows the only good stuff is Simic, but Golgari does get to benefit from the Eternal Witness part of Simic. So I see like for me in my mind, this is such an easy swap because I figured I could keep a lot of my like ramp, a lot of my removal. I mean, I can get rid of some of my ramp because of the nature of the Gitrog, but like you have to get up to the Gitrog first. But I'm getting rid of some of my draw engines in favor of protection spells for my commander that has trample and haste. So I can, get him to connect, draw me the cards, and get the value. And it benefits from the same, raid boss creatures. Like I have Sheoldred, the Whispering One, and Avenger of Zendikar, which like both the decks want to ramp into these big creatures, but they just kind of achieve the goal in different ways. And so I can afford to have like the big creatures. This is just the same as Marin, but kind of swap out some of those Marin specific stuff, like things that fill the graveyard, or things that just have abusable ETBs like a Ravenous Chupacabra, stuff that's maybe overcosted, but I want to get those, ETBs repeatedly.
Yeah, this is one of those decks where like the Ravenous Chupacabras, or I think Fleshbag Marauders, another famous one.
Sure.
Just having like the endless loops of them is a lot of fun. I actually played, ironically, as we're recording this, I actually played a game last night where we were looking at an infinite loop of Fleshbag Marauders. Kind of a similar effect, and it was a nice learning curve because it was somebody that didn't necessarily play a big like graveyard recursion style deck as their main bread and butter.
Right.
So it was nice. It was kind of interesting to have the conversation where you're like, oh, okay, this is a cool effect to kind of infinitely loop, but also make sure you've got something at the end that you could sack off instead of Fleshbag Marauder. So you could end the loop so you don't just wipe everyone's board and then still have a perpetual loop going.
And then the game just fizzles out eventually. We all
even though you've got a huge advantage.
A classic Polyraptor scenario, where the game just halts because the infinite combo cannot be stopped and there's like nothing you can do. The game's over.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, my deck, I was able to slot out 25 cards and get kind of an effective shell that I'm, excited to test and then work around and remove cards as I see fit for, a minimal, cost monetarily. And so like a lot of the cards I'm swapping in are things like, Yargle and Multani, which is like just a big 18/6 vanilla creature, but obviously does a lot in the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. And then more, like I said, a ton of those protection spells like Tameo Safekeeping, that sort of thing. But I kept the utility, the ramp, and the removal, and it's a full new deck, and I'm very excited to bust it out. So hopefully next week my week in Magic is not as unfortunate as this week's.
Yeah, we'll liven up. We will have to test it out when we play together next. Because I am kind of curious. I'm not sure how I feel yet about the whole like mount and saddle thing. Like, it seems interesting because I know some people have done a lot of work with vehicles, but I'm just not sold 100% on the mounting idea because it seems like one of those things that could both be Thunder Junction exclusive that you never see again, but also one of those things you could see splashed in other sets going forward where they go, hey, every horse could be saddled, or every, any like four-legged creature, they go, hey, this dragon could be saddled because Magda's out or something.
Yeah, all your horses gain saddle X, and when they are saddled, they get a benefit too. That's interesting. I think originally I kind of thought the same thing. I think saddle is kind of a unfortunate like term. Like I think it could have just been mount and then the keyword is mount one, and like it doesn't have to be too crazy, but I do agree. I think saddle and mounts will transcend Thunder Junction, because that's something that applies in a lot of fantasy. I think they might errata. I guess they will never errata any cards because it's just such an it's a difficult mechanic. But it's similar to banding, so they could errata banding to be a form of saddle mount.
Yeah, or I could see something where like when they make new versions of already existing commanders, like one that comes to my mind because we're talking about mountable frogs is like Tatsunari Toad Rider.
Oh, I
And
mean,
maybe they make a new,
it's in the name.
Like they make a new version and then Kaimi the frog that he creates.
Tatsunara Toad Mounter.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe it's the flip. Now it's the Toad's turn to ride him. He gets mount.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end this episode preemptively for us. We do have a small announcement though to make before we get out of here regarding a new platform that our episodes are available on.
Yeah. So we are now. Well, I guess we were last week too, but officially. You can now catch us out on Apple Podcasts. So if you find yourself out on Apple Podcasts or iTunes and you are feeling like supporting the show, we would greatly appreciate it if you can give us a follow and a rating, especially when you're a brand new podcast on a platform. It does take a good bit of effort to kind of get traction in the early going and make sure you're popping up on searches and stuff like that and you're getting promoted in the right places. I don't want to get too inside baseball with it, but every rating in the beginning is going to be more weighted because you're the only person rating us or one of the only 5 people rating us. So if you wouldn't mind taking 2 seconds and doing that, that would be greatly appreciated. And hey, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary of the podcast in a couple weeks at this point. So any support, and obviously all the support you guys have already given us throughout the year has been greatly appreciated. We go through the moon over and over about how much you guys have been able to give back to us and how much we've been able to kind of grow it because of all the support and all the help that we get from you guys. Also, one other quick thing. So last week we had Brian, the unskilled commander, on. So if you guys are not doing anything this weekend, this podcast comes out on Friday. And so tomorrow, if you're listening to it on the launch day, I'm going to be out on Brian's Twitch channel, The Unskilled Commander. We're going to be helping raise money for the Trevor Project. He's doing a 12-hour stream running from noon to midnight Eastern Standard Time. Different pods every 2 hours. I'll be on the third pod, I believe, which starts at 4 p.m. So if you want to watch him all day, he'll be running from noon to midnight. If you want to just see what I'm up to, I'll be on from 4 p.m. till I guess 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be myself, Brian, of course, Matt from Flavor Profiles, and one other creator that I do not know and I've never met. So we'll see how they flesh out with all his podcasters on a pod.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And just to be clear, that is going to be April 27th. So that is Saturday, April 27th at 12 p.m. Yes. I don't know what time zone.
Eastern Standard Time.
EST. So put it on your calendars. It'll be a ton of fun.
Yeah. But I think that gets us to the end of today's episode. If you want to follow us and give your own question of the week or give Cole an idea for another deck he should brew, maybe it should have all 3 Gitrog monsters. We can have a Gitrog trilogy going. You can reach out to Cole at loveandmana.mtg. You can find me at Sleevecard, or you can reach out to the pod directly at UrCastPod or contact.urcast@gmail.com. You can use that to submit any of your question of the weeks, any of your brew of the weeks, or just kind of see what we're up to throughout the day. But thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. Have yourselves a magical Friday, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Bye.